The records from the Federal Mortgage Bank actually indicated Nigeria is plagued with a deficit of about 28 million housing units. Now, according to the report, the country requires 21 trillion naira to be able to bridge this gap. Now, to look at the various interventions by the private sector, we have with us in the studio Ebuka Anichebe. Did I get that correct?
That's you, right? Yeah.
All right. He's a realtor and, of course, a serial entrepreneur. You're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
All right. So a deficit of 28 million housing units. That's a large number.
Yes, it is.
And another large number is 21 trillion naira that is needed to actually bridge that gap.
Yes. So from the private sector perspective, a couple of points. For the last, I will say in Abuja here, for the last 8 years, there's been a concept known as joint venture partnerships, right? That has been going on, whereby young developers partner with more landowners, right, in order to build houses, and then they have a sharing formula. Now, this helps in one way. Assuming you have land, but you don't have the means to develop that land, but you've been allocated a land, rather than leaving it fallow, you partner with him, and he builds on that land. Say he builds 6 units, and then he gives you 3 units and takes 3 units. That's one way for us to drive this forward. There's been a lot of emphasis in the past on mass housing schemes, and lands were allocated to different developers. But what you find now is the same lands that were allocated for the purpose for developers to actually go build on, they haven't done anything. And they come out to the secondary market and they're trying to resell it for billions and billions and billions. That doesn't help us in any way, right? It doesn't help the economy. It's the lands are less fallow, and again, infrastructure doesn't get there anytime soon. So what we're saying is we should expand this concept so that more people are brought in on board. The minister of the FCT has the right to say, if you do not develop these mass housing lands between these dates, it will be revoked. That would drive them to go out. I mean, the people sitting on these lands and just making, hoping that somebody will come and buy from them. They will go out and actually get developments out there. And if they can't do that, then they'll have to partner with somebody.
Interesting. You have 2 names that are very daring to me, Ebuka and Anichebe, for very obvious reasons. I'm not sure which one I should call you, but...
Both.
Okay. Every time you look at the Nigeria housing space, you just get confused. You know why? You drive through the streets of Abuja and you see so many houses unoccupied.
Yes.
I wonder if those houses are part of the statistics. That's one. 2, where you find this development going on, they seem to be putting things that are completely out of the reach of myself and Ibrahim.
Yes.
And so what we call mass housing scheme would be like the county houses in London, would be like the 1004 in Lagos. Why is it difficult for us to replicate those kind of model and have a sort of rent to own kind of arrangement rather than the kind of structures that would demand some 20 million down payment? I mean, if you have to put my head in an abattoir, you won't find that money.
Exactly. So I think there's been a gap in terms of the information that the Federal Mortgage Bank and the secondary markets of other mortgage banks and then the people have. We have less than 3% of Nigerians accessing the NHF funds, National Housing Funds, right? That's pathetic. So you want to see a situation where you have people well informed on how to go about getting a mortgage. There are about 36 mortgage firms in Nigeria, right? And from these 36 mortgage firms, they contribute less than 2% to the GDP. For the reason that most Nigerians don't even understand what it means to take a mortgage, down payments, whether or not they're contributing to the National Housing Fund, how to access those contributions and make a down payment. These are issues that need to be addressed, right? I mean, the mortgage banks, the secondary banks won't do that on their own. They need to have sensitization by the National Housing Fund, right? To tell them, look, this is what you have, this is how you go about it. And it needs to be a lot more easier to access. So that's on the one hand. The second phenomenon you mentioned, which is quite strange, is moving around Abuja, you see developed houses, but nobody's living in those houses. And then again, you see a couple of reasons could contribute to this. Number one, people are just building those houses as a way of money laundering. Yes, stashing out money. That's what money laundering is definitely one of the issues. Second thing is, there's a situation where the judiciary plays a role in this. What do I mean by this? If I rent you a house for the first 2 years and you pay your rents, and then the third year you can't pay your rents and you take me to court as your landlord, that property is likely going to be in court for the next 4 years and you'll be living rent-free, right? And so landlords in fear of this would rather sit down on an empty property and hope to sell when they need money, as opposed to having an occupier there that may not renew their rent and then quickly run to courts and get a stay of injunction and stay there for God knows how long.
So is that not a function of the kind of agreement you were given before you set in? Because if you have the loopholes properly covered and you defined what would happen in the event of a default, shouldn't that take care of that rather than wait for a court system that seems to be overburdened by the number of cases?
Exactly, it's overburdened, that's number one. But then again, the court system here in Nigeria is more likely to protect the weaker party. And the weaker party here is more likely to be the renter, especially if the renter is exposed, has a family, has children. Are you going to throw them out in the open for a landlord that isn't staying there necessarily? So that's always has been the case. And so when landlords go through this kind of experience, then they're unlikely they don't want to go through this experience once more. So now something came in recently, and a lot of people are doing shortlets. So the concept of shortlets is like Airbnb. So they furnish the house, semi-furnished, have the white goods, washing machine, microwave, and all of that. And you come, and instead of you paying for long term, for a year, you can pay for 1 month. Okay. Right? But this concept, you're not going to be given a tenancy agreement, because on the basis of that tenancy agreement, a lot of tenants used to go to the court and say, "Oh, my landlord didn't do this." But if you're given a guest form, and you're there for a month, if you can't pay, then it's easy for me to say, hey, you know what, you can go, and there's nothing for you to resort to because you're not necessarily a tenant in the eyes of the law. So these are some of the ways that we in private sector, we're trying to just mitigate the challenges that we see. But then again, you can't blame people when they build houses and they want to recoup as fast as they can, because the cost of construction is prohibitively expensive. 70% of your building materials are imported. You're not getting any cheap money, so to speak, right? In terms of building, construction funds are usually gotten from banks and not from the capital market. So it really becomes really expensive and prohibitively so for even the developer to go into there. And then not to mention foreign exchange rates always constantly fluctuating. Now what this means is even if somebody in the diaspora, because the earlier show you were talking about diaspora, if they come to invest in Nigeria and they're investing in dollars, so say for example I bring in $100,000 from a doctor friend of mine, and he invests and he builds a couple of houses, and then 3 years time he wants to sell those houses, but then the naira has fallen against the dollar. So he may be recouping back less than he invested, simply because of that. So these are some of the issues that we tend to deal with.
All right. Well, Ebuka Inichipe, it's been lovely having you.